everybody, Adam Cleary from FourFourTwo here. Just don't worry about the suit, it's not important, it's a whole other thing. What is important is Tottenham Hotspur against Manchester City, and what the hell happened there? A lot of people are saying that Spurs were lucky because City could have scored about 4 or 5, and a lot of people are saying that Spurs were actually quite naive, turning up and not adapting their style against those opponents, but I say, no, they absolutely deserve that point at a bare minimum, and to call them lucky or to say they need to adapt their style completely misses the point of what Ange Postecoglu is doing here. Let's explore. Okay, so first things first, the elephant in the room. That was one of the weirdest and wrongest calls I have ever seen in a football game. Man City were clean through on goal. Simon Hooper gives the advantage and then doesn't. And fair play, you have never seen a still image that better shows a man lining the inside of his own shorts as he realizes the impending consequences of his own actions. But as daft as this might sound, we will revisit this exact moment in time at the end of the video to show you why this incredibly fortunate thing that happened for Spurs does actually prove that it wasn't luck at all. Just trust me. Alright, so I'm not going to name any pundits here, Gary Neville, but the one thing that really annoyed me about the coverage of this game was the implication that Spurs had just turned up at the Etihad and not adapted their style at all. They didn't care about who they were playing, they were just going to do Tottenham stuff. And that's just wrong, because they did make massive changes to the way they play to accommodate the fact it was Man City. Like, Spurs have been playing with this sort of double pivot 2-3-1 thing since Maddison's injury, but what they really want to happen is for the other midfielder to be able to push up. Basuma comes into the middle, then usually one of the fullbacks, possibly even both, depending on how they're feeling, they invert into the middle and they help with the build-up there. But we hardly saw any of that because Manchester City like to press you man for man. So if Spurs had attempted to get this kind of shape going in the build-up, which they normally like with the two full-backs here and the sitting midfielder here, then both Foden and Doku would have thought absolutely nothing about coming off the flanks to join them. And in that situation, you end up with a 5-on-5, and Spurs will hold their hands up and say, man for man in that situation, City are much better, so you want to avoid it happening. The whole purpose of inverting the fullbacks is they're not really supposed to be in that area, so they tend not to get tracked in it by their markers. So one of them might be free, so it's easier to play through the middle of the pitch. But if you're playing Manchester City, who will not allow you that kind of numerical advantage, then you need to find other ways. You need to adapt, that's literally what the word means, to come up with another idea. And they did. So instead of inverting their fullbacks to get into those positions, they just had Giovanni Lo Celso drop into these areas around Basuma to just relieve the pressure when they were building out. And he did that magnificently, by the way. Like, this is his pass map from the entire game, and you will see he covers so much ground in Tottenham's half of the pitch, and that was because he saw it as his job, with Basuma sort of staying centrally, to drop out to the flanks, to drop wide, to find wherever the space was being created and either receive the ball or play a bounce pass or just help with the build-up. He did not misplace one single pass in the entire 90 minutes, even with Rodri up his arse. And because of these changes they made, these adaptations, if you will, City were forced to make changes of their own, and Tottenham got a bit of joy from the spaces that created. So with Haaland, Alvarez, Silva, Foden and Doku all having a man each during Tottenham's build-up, that meant that Rodri, who should have been sitting in this area keeping an eye on Kulusevski, was forced to follow Lo Celso all the way into this area, which, lo and behold, left absolutely loads of room for Kulusevski to get on the ball if they could beat Man City's press. City then tried to counteract that by having a Kanji step out to keep an eye on him, but whenever he did that, that left space for Son to either get in behind or Bradley Johnson, who's currently on the right-hand side, to get in behind Vardiol. Now, is any of this some magic formula that saw them dominate the first half and get loads of chances on goal? Absolutely not, but they did adapt to how Manchester City play, and they adapted in a really smart way. They even adapted really well when they didn't have the ball. Like Manchester City, one of these teams that love to play that 3-box-3 formation, so they can get 4 players in this area to outnumber the opposition's 3. That should have left Tottenham with a bit of a problem, but what did they do? When City got 4 in the middle, Brian Gil, never sure how you say that. When City got 4 in the middle, rather than just being outnumbered, they would bring Brian Gil off the wing, he would leave Kyle Walker, and they would match City up man for man in the centre of the pitch. Son would then work tirelessly between the 2 remaining centre-backs to close them down and force a pass. Brennan Johnson would sit on Vardiol, so he wasn't an option, and they would leave Kyle Walker free. And why do you leave Kyle Walker free? Because of all the options City have in this area, he's the least dangerous on the ball. Yes, he can carry it forward, but he lacks an incisive pass. He lacks a killer ball. He doesn't really go round players when they're in traffic, so they were quite happy for the ball to go out to him. And when the ball finally did get out to Walker, then our man Brian G, he would then press him, but he would do so leaving the other player in what's known as shadow cover. He would block off the pass by basically running in a nice straight line, effectively meaning that wasn't an option, and isolating Kyle Walker. And did that lead to Manchester City not getting a single chance in the first half, not being able to get the ball up the pitch? No, it didn't. They were still really, really good, but this is not how Tottenham normally press. They adapted to play Man City. Now, of course, this is great, but it didn't always work, and City, you were right, should probably have been out of sight at half-time. Having Ben Davies and Emerson Royale at the back, as good as they were, meant that this system had huge flaws in it. Emerson is not great at receiving the ball under pressure, and 2 or 3 times when City really pressed up on Tottenham, his body shape was just all wrong, and he gave it away. Haaland really should have scored from that. And then for the Foden goal, Tottenham are holding one of their famous "we do not move high" lines. Ben Davies has really solid defensive fundamentals. He sees this run, instinct tells him to go with him, but that drags him out of position and plays everyone else on side, and it all falls apart, and that's how they score. So, positives, yes, but also negatives. So they're doing all right, but City is still tearing them to bits. So at half-time, Ange Postecoglu makes another change. He adapts to how the game is going. He adapts to Manchester City. So he takes off Brian Gill Halfpenny, who was getting sort of physically bullied by Kyle Walker at this point, and brings on Højbjerg, which for a man who was unable to adapt or make defensive changes is a pretty big adaptable defensive change. And what he wanted to do was pose Man City this question, and that was, when this is Lo Celso, Rodri's very happy to follow him into that space, okay? But what if A, it wasn't Lo Celso, and B, he wasn't following into that space, he was just sitting there as a double pivot permanently? Are you happy to commit a 6th player this far up the pitch when we are building out from the back? Do you really want to leave us 4v4 in your half of the pitch? And the answer for the vast majority of that second half was, actually, no, that seems incredibly risky. So Rodri stopped tracking into that area. He sat on the number 10, who was now Lo Celso, and Tottenham could build out from the back much easier. And did that make a difference? Well, Tottenham had 36% possession in the first half, which I'm sure we'll all agree, no judgment here, very normal amount of possession for a team to have away at City. And in the second half, did that change? Yes. They had 57% possession. Do you know how many times City get outballed at home? Virtually never. In fact, immediately after making this change, there was like a 10 or 15 minute spell where Tottenham had 75% of the ball. And because Rodri was now sitting in front of this back four, ostensibly looking for something to do, it meant that Man City centre-backs could play a little bit wider, which is fine. It makes you more expansive, but it also means that if Son can drop onto Rodri and drag him out of position with a run, as he did for that equalising goal, it leaves you number 10, in this case Lo Celso, a really good opportunity to get to the edge of the box and get a shot away. So a really nicely worked equalising goal and a much improved, dare I say it, almost controlling second half performance, all because Ange Postecoglu adapted to what Manchester City were doing. That's great, right? Well, yes, but this is not the point. As good as Tottenham were, Man City still had the chances to win this game comfortably, and that's why these accusations of naivety or just being too open or needing to make even more adaptations have come in from pundits. But to say that Ange Postecoglu should stop leaving Tottenham so open in these big games, or that the reason he does so is because he's in some way naive and maybe just doesn't realise what's going to happen unless you're a bit more defensive, just completely misses the point of what he has done with this football club. Like, people couldn't stop laughing at this still image of them trying to defend on the halfway line with 9 men against Chelsea, but that's their philosophy. And yes, it got them smashed against Chelsea that time, but you know what else it got them? Got them a late equaliser at the Etihad. Like, just quick question here, right? What actually is Ange ball? You? It's like this 4-3-3 where you've got Wrong, you. So it's when you invert your fullback so that you've got a numerical wrong, you. Really wide attackers stretching the defense to create room in the half space. Wrong, it's none of those things. It's not a tactic, it's not a system, it's not a formation, it's not a setup, it's not anything you can adjust with a slider on Football Manager. It is purely a mindset that goes whenever you receive the ball, no matter who you are on the pitch or what your job is, think, how can I play this forward? How can I make something happen here? It's what Brian Gilberto Silva was thinking when he receives the ball on the edge of his own box here, and instead of just laying it back to his teammate here, as would be the simple pass, he weaves and he skins a Manchester City player, and from there, Tottenham are in for the first goal. It's what Oliver Skipp was thinking here when instead of just playing this simple ball, he goes past his man instead. He risks losing possession to give the ball to Son, and from there, Tottenham get their equaliser. But it is also what Bissouma was thinking here when instead of retaining possession, he tries to dribble through 3 Manchester City players in his own final third. Now, common sense would tell you at that point it is 2-2. You've played really well. You've wrestled control back from your opponents. Just do the simple thing and try and see this point out. But that's not what Tottenham are ever trying to do. If Bissouma had got through that press, he would have taken 3 Manchester City players out of the equation and they would have been in. And for all these Spurs players, what is drilled into them by Postecoglu is, we may concede stupid goals like that every now and then, but if you can do that, we will score so many more. And here it is. I told you we would return to this moment in time. Were it not for one of the most baffling refereeing whistles ever heard, Tottenham would have been caught in the final seconds of the game, pushed entirely up to the halfway line. And it isn't because they're naive, it is because this is how they choose to play. They accept the risk of this happening if it means there might be a chance they can win the game. And that is Ange ball. Now, yes, of course, Man City should just take their chances and we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But the fact is, they didn't. And Tottenham turned up against the best team in the world, let's not forget, with a game plan and a system that meant that if City didn't get out of sight, they were always going to have chances. How many teams do you see turn up against Manchester City and not play the way they want to play, to put everybody behind the ball and still just get humped anyway? Like, if you're playing Manchester City away from home, you're probably just gonna get beat anyway, so why not have a go? And likewise, if you are down to 9 men against Chelsea, you're probably gonna get beat anyway, so why not have a go? Like, just bottom line here, I thought Tottenham played this absolutely perfectly. I thought they got it spot on against City this weekend. And if you want to sit there and say, yeah, but they had these enormous slices of luck with City's wasteful finishing and the referee right at the end, then I agree. Those were so lucky. But if there's ever going to be a mindset or a strategy in football that will just seem to create its own luck a little bit more often than it should, this one. And I mean, also just scoring 3 goals against Man City when you're missing your most creative player, you just deserve some credit, don't you? Anyway, that's the video. If you enjoyed it, please do consider subscribing to us here at FourFourTwo on YouTube. I'm not normally this well dressed, but I do try to be this insightful. Get me on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere else. Adam Cleary, Clery, 442 socials in the corner of the video for you. The last week that the mag is in shops, I think, before the sexy new one comes out. So treat yourself to that. And until next time, I think that's everything. Ange Ball, Adam Cleary, 442. Please subscribe. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.